Hey, young people. This is a shorty but goodie today. Last week you learned the imperfect tense for regular verbs. It's really easy. All you do is you get the stem, you add a BA, and then you put in the personal ending, either active or passive. So, ammo becomes amabom. Amas becomes amabas. When you form the imperfect indicates incomplete or repeated action. So we usually render this as I was verbing, whatever the verb happens to be. So I'm a bomb, I was loving. What happens when you encounter an irregular verb, though? Remember back to chapter 6 of first semester. You learned two irregular verbs, sum and possum. Here they are in the book just to prove you already learned it. So you remember sumus est, sumus est sunt. You learned that the last chapter before the midterm exam. You took a quiz on it, and you also learned possum, potest, possumus, potestus, possum. This is the to be able verb, if there is such a thing. The to be able verb, it exists in Latin, but there's no real equivalent in English. We have to combine this with a adjective. We translate this as I am able, you are able, and so on. You already wrote these forms down on your yellow sheet in chapter 6, first semester. They should look like this. Today we're going to learn how to form these in the imperfect. You would assume, if the world were perfectly logical, you would just throw in the letters BA and be done with it. So for the first person singular, instead of sum, I am, you would think it's subam, S-U-B-A-M. Instead of S, you are, you would assume it's ebas, E-B-A-S. It's a little bit different than that. It's equally simple, but that's not how you do it. Instead, to form the imperfect of sum and possum, you take these three letters, E, R, and A, and you combine them with the active personal ending. So for each one of these, they're all going to start with ERA. By the way, sum and its derivatives are the only verbs in all of Latin that when you put them in the imperfect tense, don't have a BA in them. Every other verb, even irregular verbs, wolo wele, the verb of wishing, or eo ire, the to go verb, they all use the BA thing to form the imperfect. It's only sum and the derivatives of sum that form this way. All right, it says then put in an active personal ending. So MST mus tis ent. I'm going to go through and color code this. The ERA, I reckon to be the most important part, so I'll do that in a bright yellow. ERA, ERA, ERA. The active personal ending, I'll do this in green. Your assignment for today is to make these notes. You don't necessarily need to color code like this. What about a translation for these? Well, we learned in the last lesson that the imperfect tense is incomplete or repeated action. So what does it mean if you were continuously being in the past over and over again? Or what does it mean if you were being in the past and then that action was interrupted? So you think about some examples of this. You might say something like, I was being a student at Randall Middle School for 3 years. I was being in Latin class every day for the first 3 quarters of this school year. Then it might occur to you, we never ever say that in English. Instead, we wouldn't say I was being a student at Randall. We would really just say I was a student at Randall. Or in the other example, you would say I was in class every day for the first 3 quarters of the school year. We indicate repeated action in the past with a was. We indicate incomplete action in the past with a was. I had a student point out once that we will say was or were being if we're emphasizing behavior. Like you might say, I was being good, but then I found out I was on Santa's naughty list. But you're using the verb in a little bit different way there. Being is sort of a synonym for behaving in that case. But 99% of the time, we wouldn't say was or were being. We would just say was or were. So, eram, I was. Eras, you were. Erat, he or she or it was. Eramus, we were. Eratus, you all were. Erant, they were. No BAs, but still, when taken unto itself, it's still 100% regular. What about possum? That second thing we learned in chapter 6. See, then sum is to be, possum is to be able. Here's the original notes that you should already have on your yellow sheet for this. Now, if you remember, possum forms because you have sum, which is to be, and then you have this adjective, potens, in Latin. Potens means able. So they just cut the POT off. So, potes. It's literally you are pot, able. Potest, he, she, it is. And what does pot mean? Able. So he, she, it is able. They do something really similar. If you want to form the imperfect form of possum, all you do is get pot, which means able, plus ERA, just like you did for sum, plus active personal endings. So we'll color code this with orange for pot. We'll keep ERA in yellow, just like we did a second ago. And the active personal ending we'll do in green. So instead of eram, it's pot. E-R-A-M. Poteram. Instead of eras, it's poteras. Oh, and by the way, a couple macrons in here. Instead of erat, it's pot erat. Pot eramos. Pot eratis. Poterant. Don't forget the color code. Pot, 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 pot. Era. And MST mus tis ent. Okay, so if eram is I was, and pot, like we said from chapter 6, is a shortened form of potanes. It just means able. This would be I was able. Poteras, you were, is eras. Pot is able, so you were able. Poterat, he, she, it was able. We were able. You all were able. They were able. That's it for the second chart you need to know today. I'm going to zoom out and get everything all on one screen. To get credit for today, there's no spot anywhere on the yellow sheet for this. It doesn't exist. It just has irregular verbs, sum and possum, and they're in the present tense. But either write this on a sheet of paper, these two charts, for sum in the imperfect and possum in the imperfect. You can also type it up in a Word document or some other text document and submit that to the assignment for today, and that will get you full credit. Thank you. Message me if you have any questions.